Hey, I want to talk about this homeownership. While homeownership continues to fall, Australia is now ahead of us. The number of renters has increased to over 30%. It's quite extraordinary. This is Aotearoa. What should minimum standards for rental housing be? Should they be all warm and safety? Let's start with you, Chris. What would you like to see? Are you quite amazed by the numbers now? I mean, society is changing. More renters than ever before.
I'm not surprised, unfortunately. But if you're talking about renters and the kind of conditions that they should have in their homes, I think you should have minimum insulation, minimum heating. Exactly what's in Andrew Little's Healthy Homes Guarantee Bill. It's the kind of thing that we need.
All right. What about you, Nook? What did we just say?
Well, if we look at May this year, there was the Residential Tenancy Amendment Bill that was put through. It was unanimous, by the way. And what that actually brought in was that it was compulsory to have smoke alarms from the 1st of July. And then when we also look at the insulation, social housing, the ceiling, the walls, and also the floor insulation has come into effect on the 1st of July. But then the other rental housing actually will come into effect in 2019.
Is the message getting across to landlords though? Because Wellington, for example, Wellington's got some shocking examples, Tracy, of some, can I just say it, some pretty shitty places, which, you get mould on the inside, your shoes and your clothes are completely mouldy. A lot of students complain the fact that the landlords now just don't give us stuff. What do you see?
Well,
did I hear a yes?
Yeah. I mean, the reality is the residential, the Tenancy Act needs to be addressed. It needs to be addressed, though, from a different perspective, we think. We actually need to be encouraging some. I was at a Decile 1 school today, and because those people are renting, because the families are renting, they keep moving their kids through schools. We need to have encourage much longer tenancy agreements. They need to be able to take pride in being part of that community. How do we, and that's what New Zealand First is looking at, incentivise
So should the government, though, should the government have a role in this? Should the government be more involved?
Absolutely, the government should have a role. And, there's a standard that we need to hold people to.
Look, the government is actually really working hard towards getting more regulation around, just what I said, insulation, also smoke alarms. But the other part of it is that it's actually assisting, there's actually more teeth now. In that amendment bill to actually police.
I'm sorry, but
You've called them shitty houses, and what we're seeing is bullshit responses from the government. It's the same thing they always do, a small token response to give the appearance they're acting. The experts are saying it's not good enough. We've got 1 million substandard homes in this country. Thousands of people are hospitalised every year, including kids, and the government's saying, I'll put a smoke alarm in the rental.
We need a proactive response, not a reactive response, a proactive response. Go out and check these houses.
Chris, you talk about students, you make a good point, because there's obviously students in the part at the moment, but there are families in those situations with children, as Gareth said, and that's simply not good enough.
I want to bring up an issue. I want to bring an example. This was in the Dominion Post. I think it was in the Don Post, where you've got the situation, right, where the living room has been subdivided into these wooden plank cubicles. It's bizarre, but it's
study pods, apparently.
It's the study pods. So what we're seeing is something, Nook, is not working. Let's go to Hayley in the audience.
Yes, I am here with Lindsay Higgins, the president of the Students' Union, aren't you? Obviously, students get hit hardest here. Do you think the government is doing enough to protect renters?
We think there can always be more. We really favour a Warrant of Fitness scheme, but we're happy to work with the government of the day to see what we can do to make lives better for students.
Let's be honest here, though. Isn't it sometimes the tenant's responsibility to look after the house and make sure it's in a good nick?
We think that students can't do a lot about things like insulation. I think we need to have an attitude change around the way we look at flats. So if I go and buy some food and it makes me sick, we know that that is unacceptable and that those who sell dodgy food should not be in business. And we think that if there's properties that make people sick, they should not be in business.
Yeah, well, I agree with you. Have you ever had to live in a substandard house?
I have, and it's awful. My clothes all grew mould. I was constantly sick. My mental health suffered because I was always sick. My studies suffered. And it's just an awful place to be in, and you don't have the choice to do any better because you can't afford it.
And it's not just students, it is families and everybody, and people like me as well who are renting. So back to you, Wallace.
All right, very interesting. Hey, anybody, just hands, anybody in the audience actually who can sort of sympathise with that and who has lived in a substandard rental accommodation? Hands up. Maybe Hayley, go to one of those people.
Yes, we'll put this one down just for now. What, what sort of place have you lived in and why did it make you sick?
I lived up in Kelburn Parade near Victoria University, and the landlord we had there didn't give us a tenancy at all. We moved in, and then if we complained about any of the conditions, he would threaten us having to move out. We ended up paying overpriced prices for each room, and I slept at night in sweatshirts and everything. After having to leave that flat, I spent 4 weeks homeless on friends' couches. I'm 19, and then eventually found a hostel which I can move into now so I can continue my study.
So does that make you not want to complain or not want to raise any issues?
Well, I wanted to complain, but if I complain, I got nowhere to go. And then trying to find other places, it's not that easy. Because everyone else, all these other students, are trying to find a place to go to.
So really the landlords do have all of the power.
It's quite interesting, actually. I mean, Gareth, here's an email, for example. Here's one. As a landlord, I've given up going to the tenancy tribunal for unpaid rent from tenants who've done a runner or fallen weeks behind due to our trust and goodwill that the rent will be paid. It happened more than once, and I am sick of it. And I hear from landlords all the time that they are toothless when it comes to extracting the rent from tenants who simply don't want to pay.
Look, I think there's always going to be those stories out there. I don't think the law's toothless. I do think it's out of date. I mean, the Residential Tenancies Act dates from 1986. A lot of the health and safety stuff comes from the early 50s. We need modern rentals, and I agree with Tracy. And Materia Ture's got a bill in the parliamentary ballot which is trying to extend secure tenancy, make sure we've got those good rights for tenants, because it's written in a home ownership age, and unfortunately under the current government policies, we're going into
Have you
rental
ever rented?
society.
What's your experience?
Yeah, look, I've had rentals with holes in the floor, mushrooms growing in the shower. I put the first bill to Parliament 6 years ago for a Warrant of Fitness for rentals. So I've taken MPs from all the parties around the country. We've seen some absolute shockers, and it's criminal.
Have you ever rented?
Yes, I have. But can I just make one point, is that with the amended Residential Tenancy Act, what this has addressed is exactly some of the issues that we're hearing here tonight. I see one of the most important ones is particularly around the rental tribunal. I mean, all of these sort of different bodies, I mean, they have to adhere now.
But it hasn't addressed the price either. Look, I mean, for example, you've got in Wellington, the average rent in Wellington now is $406. The demand for rentals is desperate. That's what it's been described as, $406. So it's addressing some things, but not the price.
Well, it actually is addressing the price, because what there is that there's a balance actually between what is a fair rental, so what is actually a market rent, so what is the tenant prepared to pay, and also compare that with what the
all right, okay, final
the renter
thing.
is actually prepared to actually accept.
Final point, Chris. I mean, now you're at a stage where 51% of Aucklanders now rent. Is this the way it's going to have to be?
It shouldn't be, and that's why I think you need some kind of program to build as many affordable homes as you can, which, funnily enough, we've got a policy about, to make sure that isn't a long-term setting for the country.
Tracy, briefly, is this the way it has to be?
I don't want my children to have to rent, and that's why, funnily enough, we have a policy about it that's better than their policy about it.
Right.
But no, I don't want my children to have to rent. We shouldn't have to accept that, no.
Okay.